Robert Kiyosaki says, don't buy this dip. Uh, Robert Kiyosaki says, don't buy this dip. If you're following Bitcoin, you would know that you're in a bit of a low point right now. And normally, most people would say dollar cost average, buy the dip so that you can get a good price. But Robert Kiyosaki seems to think that you shouldn't. He also said a couple of other strange things that I think I need to respond to. So here I go.
So everybody says crypto is in a bear market or Bitcoin is in a bear market. And I trade Bitcoin, but I don't think it has any value. I just play the game. And so I want to know how young guys like you can sit there and say, oh, it's only 21 million. I said, but where'd they come from? But I had to buy it at 6,000. And then the next lot I bought was around 9,000. And I had to wait from it. I think it hit 20,000 at one time. Then it retraced down to like 1,000. And I had to watch to see if it was going to rebound. Basically, I traded it. And today it's coming down from I don't know what, but I'm going to get ready to start buying again, but it has to go a little bit lower. So everybody says crypto is in a bear market or Bitcoin is in a bear market, but so is the stock market and so is the bond market. The other question I have as a guy who knows nothing about this field, except I have a lot of money in it, how come there's so many thousands of cryptos? Yeah, it kind of reminds me of what we call the dot-com era. You know, back around 2000, everybody had a .com company. You know, it was just this .com and that .com. And everybody was chasing these .com companies and it all came crashing down. Jeff, one of the reasons I have gold coins, and I mean real gold coins and real silver coins, is there's no counterparty risk. You know what I mean? They are the money.
Right.
So when you say there's a dollar, somebody declares it a dollar and all that, who's the counterparty? Is it the Wizard of Oz? For listeners out, there's a thing called counterparty risk. You know, there's nobody else behind the gold coin. There's no Wizard of Oz, no smoking mirrors. The other thing I like about gold and silver coins is that, as you know, in this cyber warfare, if they knock out our electronic systems, coins disappear too. But if let's say the Russians fire up and EMF, one of those things, bombs go off, they're not.
Okay, there's a few things I got to unpack from what Robert Kiyosaki is talking about here. First off, he says that it's just a game to him. He doesn't know where Bitcoins come from. I find that a little hard to believe. He seems to think that gold, it doesn't have any counterparty risk. It actually does. So if you look at how gold works, if you're buying gold on the markets, for example, you're in a counterparty situation where you're buying it from this market and they say you have the gold, but just like he was talking about a moment ago, if there was some kind of a Russian attack, what he was starting to talk about, all the coins would disappear. Like the odds of that are very slim, not to mention the fact that it's a distributed ledger. So it's all over the world. There are copies everywhere. So even if there was some kind of event like that to happen, it'll still recover. Gold coins, on the other hand, where the value of that comes in is basically from mining. So you have miners who are supplying the amount of gold that actually makes it to the market. And in addition to that, gold and silver are commodities. So instead of having a pure value based on a commodity, you have a commodity that is competing with its value versus just Bitcoin by itself. I don't think he understands that. But Robert seems to think that there has to be some kind of lower dip. Clearly, he's been in the markets for a number of years. If he was buying Bitcoin at 9,000 and went up to 20,000, he's talking about the 2017 time. So he thinks at this stage, it should be able to go down to levels like that. I think he might be mistaken because I don't think he understands just how much it's grown since then. So, yeah, let's see what else he has to say about the wonders of silver and gold.
Knock out the grid, gold and silver stays there. So that's kind of what I just want to give people the differences on this whole thing. And I still own quite a bit of Bitcoin and Ethereum, but I'm waiting for the price to come down before I buy more, take another position in both Bitcoin and Ethereum. I just want people to know that, to don't think, because I get promoted all the effing time. you got to get in on this one, or you got to get in on that one. This one's going to go to the moon. You know, I'm an old man. I've heard this bullshit so many times over all these years in real estate, stocks, you know, and that's why we have the Rich Dad Radio Show. It's not to promote anything, but the idea of understanding what's good and what's bad about something. So how does a person find out more? I mean, so for somebody like me, it's best I not get into it because I'm not tech savvy at all. Yeah, there's a guy named Meyer Amschel Rothschild who said, I care not who makes the rules, just let me control the money. So as a, you know, since I was a little kid at 9 years old studying money, well, I realized the only people that control money are governments, tyrants, and despots. And so that's the Federal Reserve Bank and the U.S. Treasury. Right. And one of the reasons I have gold and silver and Bitcoin is because I don't trust the government, I don't trust the Fed, I don't trust the Treasury. So my question is, how long do you think, are you trying to say that the government will never be able to stop Bitcoin?
The government will never be able to stop Bitcoin. They can only control the conversions to USD.
Until I convert to dollars, but as long as I stay outside the U.S. criminal system.
So let's pause right there. So he said a few things that were kind of interesting there. Number one, his point about the government printing money, about controlling the money, and his distrust of it, and that's why he has gold, silver, and Bitcoin. It's a little contradictory to the whole idea that he said he's just playing the game of Bitcoin, but then he's going on to say that he owns it because the government can't control it. And then he asks, you know, can the government stop it? And the answer to his guest says no. And this is true. And this is why governments generally around the world are quite threatened by Bitcoin and what's going on because they can't control it. They can't just print it the way they can with their fiat. And this is what's caused this inflationary issue that we have around the world, and all the issues that we're facing in society today can all be traced back to the government's money press, you know, with being able to print money continuously. With the inflation they're causing, it's causing lots of people to lose the value of their dollars that they have in their country, while the ones that are winning are basically everyone who's closest to the government that are getting those newly printed dollars first, right? So first it goes out to the banks give it to the big hedge funds and the big financial institutions. They get to take that money and put it into assets. And then of course the price goes up. And then by the time you actually see any of that money trickle down, so to speak, the value of those assets have already skyrocketed because of the inflation. And now your ability to be able to get into those assets is diminished, right? So the financial institutions and the governments and everything else, they win, you lose. And that's what he's speaking about right now. Gold and silver in those kind of scenarios against the dollar, yes, they will be better. But Bitcoin will allow you to be able to transact with these things. Gold and silver, I mean, if you have the actual physical coins, you have to think about all kinds of things. How are you going to be able to get it to another country? How are you going to be able to hold it on your person to transact with? Is dangerous because you could be robbed, right? The possibility of being able to rob your Bitcoin is much more difficult in comparison. So yeah, and he's talking about the money system essentially being corrupt, and I would agree. So Robert and I agree on this point. So let's continue to see what he has to say.
Okay, I don't know much. I have an old brain, but to me, where did that come from? What was the source? Look,
it's baked in the protocol.
I understand, but somebody just typed it up. They made it up. That's my opinion, and I'm willing to be wrong on this one. But I own oil wells.
You are wrong, actually.
And to me, oil is money. But I have to dig it up. I have to ship it someplace. I own oil, gold companies, gold mines, and silver mine. So we dig it out and we actually ship it somewhere. But hundreds of millions of crypto come in. Didn't it just come off a computer?
No, so people personally had to send it.
No, I understand. But how did they develop the coin to send or the money to send? Where did it come from?
Some people had to purchase it, or they've made it off of other transactions. But it's not minted out of thin air from nothing. There is a protocol that has a specific percentage of inflation. I
understand. To me, Jeff, I'm glad you write for the Rich Dad Crypto newsletter, but the old guys like me go, this is more smoke and mirrors. This is more Wizard of Oz. You look behind the scenes there. What did that money come from? That's my question. As an old guy, and I still own Bitcoin. I'm waiting it to go drop down to 20K, and I'll probably start buying.
Okay. So I just paused it just to speak to that point about where did it come from? What is Bitcoin? So he's talking about gold and oil and silver and all these things are real to him, right? And that he can take it out of the ground and he can turn it into something. And it's true. And of course, I mean, with oil, what are you going to do? You're going to have to ship it. That's going to take a giant container ship, and then you're going to have to take it across the seas, and then you're going to have to like fight off pirates that are going to take it from you. It's crazy. A Bitcoin, on the other hand, what does it do? It transacts. It's your ability to be able to ship that Bitcoin to somebody in another part of the world versus shipping that oil. Completely different, right? In addition, what is Bitcoin made of? I mean, he clearly isn't familiar with what's going on with mining Bitcoin. It all comes down to, and everything he's talking about is energy, right? It's all about energy and the convertibility of that energy. And in this case, he's talking about how oil can be converted into energy. Gold and silver are materials that are used to in different kinds of products to provide services and energy. They have their own type of energy and their own kind of convertibility. But Bitcoin, what it takes to actually create a Bitcoin is energy itself, right? You are taking energy through miners that are all going into the network to secure it. And then that is where the Bitcoin comes from, is from the mining activity. And then it's produced. And from that, you're essentially capturing energy in a point of time that's contributing to this ledger. And then people are able to transact with it. And so, of course, just like his guest said, he said, you're either going to mine it or you're going to receive it from like you can either buy it on the market or you can receive it from somebody else for a service. And these are the ways that we transact. But at the end of the day, what is Bitcoin made of? It is pure energy. It is really just a conversion of energy into a system of currency and allowing us to be able to trade that on an ongoing basis. So the dollar value of it, like he's talking now, he's going about, oh, I want it to drop down to 20K and I want to be able to have it, go cheaper. But you're talking about how the dollar is just garbage. So it's like the Bitcoin, on the other hand, is something that has value. So why wouldn't you trade your dollars as quickly as possible to get more Bitcoin? I don't know. But he seems to think that it's going to go down lower. I guess we'll have to wait and see. I think that the fundamentals of Bitcoin are just so strong. The idea that it's going to drop to 20K levels like he's hoping for, not very likely. But we'll have to wait and see, I guess, who's right.
And the question I'm kind of asking you, where does Bitcoin or Ethereum or Dogecoins or NFTs come from? Hold it, there's a use to it. People pump it into their gas tanks, or not Tesla cars, but oil is used for fertilizer, to provide food and all this stuff. I'm just putting you on the hot spot here because it's a question I have, and I'm more doing it for the Rich Dad readers. Can I trade Bitcoin? But I don't think it has any value. I just play the game. What? And so I want to know how young guys like you can sit there and say, oh, it's only 21 million. I said, but where'd they come from? I understand. Like people are cleaning my office building right now.
So it's a game. I don't think it has any value. You just said that you collect rent from apartment buildings and you had to sell your oil and you had to sell all these things in order to buy Bitcoin. I don't think he's being really, yeah, it's hard to believe that he actually thinks it's not actually valuable. If he's taken all these other things he claims are valuable and use that to sell for more Bitcoin. Yeah, sorry, Robert, I don't believe you. I think you actually really like Bitcoin and you're trying hard not to. I think it almost seems like he sees Bitcoin as something new, exciting, and sexy, but he still has this relationship with gold and silver and these old faithfuls. And I think he's feeling a little conflicted at this point. So he's conjuring up these ideas of, oh, it's this and that. Like, where does it come from? I'm just an old man. I don't understand. It's like, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. If he's taking all of his gold, selling, taking the rent and all the oil and selling it so he can get more Bitcoin. He really believes in Bitcoin. Like you don't take things like that and put into something that doesn't have value, right? That as he's claiming, right? So something else is going on here. I think maybe he's conflicted. Maybe he just doesn't know how to express that at this stage. But yeah, so just pay attention to that. So let's see a little bit more of what he has to say.
I'm not going to pay him in crypto. I'm going to pay him in USD. But they're actually doing something for the build for my business.
Well, so the crypto can be swapped immediately into USD. So even if they get paid in crypto, it's the same.
It's true.
I think you guys really don't get it from the old guys like me are going. Like I say, I own several $1 million worth of Bitcoin and Ethereum. I still don't know where it came from, but I'm saying, what did somebody do for it? Where's the tangible value? That's kind of my question. I trade this stuff. Like I think.
Okay, let's pause right there. So, see, so he's going on about the tangible value, right? Because everything he's talked about so far is like oil. You can use it for, filling your gas car and all this kind of car. Gold and silver, you can use it for all these things in production. But the fact that Bitcoin doesn't have a quote unquote tangible value, it isn't necessarily a bug, it's a feature. And what that means is that by having no intrinsic value, it allows it to be pure for what it does, right? Instead of competing with markets and the value that's needed for how much is being bought in gold and how much is being bought in silver in order to produce things, instead of competing with that, you just have Bitcoin as a unit of account, which allows for people to transact and actually have a more fair value of what they're transacting with. So Bitcoin not having an intrinsic value is actually a feature, and it's something which is unique to Bitcoin. And it's something which you need to have to be able to provide some kind of a monetary system around the world that won't have counterparty risk, which is what he's trying to get away from, right? This way, you don't have a counterparty risk that's competing with resources versus a unit of account. So this is actually something which is a benefit of Bitcoin versus the oil, gold, and silver ideas that he's going on about. And so yeah, I think that's interesting. And of course, his guest was trying to say like, oh, you could pay in crypto, and he started the whole thing about, oh, I'm just an old man, I don't understand things. I don't buy this. I think this is just a narrative. I think he understands pretty well, and he's putting all of his money into it. So I just don't buy it. I'm sorry, but sorry, Robert. I don't buy it. And keep in mind, I mean, like he's trying to tell you that he doesn't understand it. If this is true, congratulations. You're listening to somebody who has, who's very rich, and clearly they're not very smart, right? So don't be fooled by people who have a lot of money and have a lot of status. It doesn't mean that they are significantly smarter than you are. The fact that you're here listening to me here today means that you actually are smarter than they are. So you should be guarded in taking their advice, because the truth is that here he's telling you he doesn't understand it. I'm having trouble believing that, but it's important to note that rich people, they don't know more than you do. They just happen to have more than you do. So let's see the rest of what he has to say.
The US dollar is fake as hell. I just think it's a piece of crap. That's why I own gold and silver. I'd rather have something tangible, and I'd rather have oil, and I'd rather have fertilizer, because they do something. I'd rather pay somebody for their labor because they've done something. The US dollar comes from debt. It's printed. I mean, it's just basically doesn't exist. That's why all these years, that's why the Rich Dad Company was formed and all that. And people don't know what the US dollar is. It's called the fractional reserve system. I put in a dollar savings in the bank, and the bank can lend out 10. That's where dollars come from. It's on debt. And then there's guys like Dave Ramsey who say live debt free. And there's people like Rich Dad who say there's good debt and bad debt. And you have to know how to use debt to acquire assets. So we're actually converting something that is printed out of nothing, the dollar, to create assets like real estate or gold or silver or oil. So that's kind of my old man's logic.
So the old man logic, according to him, is the US dollar is garbage. It is made out of nothing. It's to create debt through the fractional reserve system. And he's completely right. I completely agree with him on this. The fractional reserve system, you're putting your dollar into the bank. The bank is turning around and giving $10 of it out, and the idea that the money printing has something to do with that, though, no. If you knew just how much inflation is occurring If you go and see what's happening, if you actually look at the budgets that are happening with your governments and your countries, you'll see that the idea of taxation even is actually a flat out lie. The idea that we need to be taxed in order to be able to have the government have the funds to pave the roads and do all these services for us to have a stable and wealthy economy and so forth is a complete lie. If you look at how much they actually spend to what they collect in taxes, the spending comes from inflation. It comes from printing money. And they do that more and more every year. Ever since the 1970s, when the US dollar went off of the gold standard, that has been what's been happening around the world. More and more countries have been participating in simply printing money as they needed it. And the amount of taxes they collected for what the governments wanted to do were never enough. If we didn't have this printing of money, we'd have no wars. You know why? Because they couldn't afford it. Governments wouldn't be able to afford having wars, but because they can just print money all the time to do these things, they do them. If they were limited in resources to carry out these agendas, you wouldn't have to worry about these sort of things. They'd actually have to be fiscally responsible and work within their budgets the same way you and I have to. There's a certain amount of debt that we use as consumers, but it's not to the scale that the government does. If you look at if the government was to tax 100% of all businesses for like the last year, it wouldn't even make a dent in the amount that they actually spent. Think about that for a moment. Like let that sink in. The money the government's spending is money they're printing. And that's it. So to his point, to get back to Robert talking about don't buy this dip, the dollar is being inflated like crazy. Bitcoin is set at 21 million, like he talked about. It is a hard asset. And what you want to do is you want to stay in hard assets. And to his point about why he's about, rich dad and poor dad and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's where you want to be. You want to be where the hard assets is. You want to be able to be where it's going to grow because the governments are printing money like crazy to a point where they're just the inflation is completely taking away all the value of your dollar. You need to get away from that as quickly as possible. So to his point about don't buy this dip, I completely disagree. You want to dollar cost average continually into Bitcoin, not financial advice, but it's what is very popular in terms of like how people approach getting into Bitcoin. If you just have those few extra dollars, because just think about every time you're holding onto cash, onto dollars, the value of those dollars are depreciating like rapidly these days. So you want to get them into something that is going to hold value. And yes, it will be volatile. It will go up and down, but it's not going to go straight down the way your dollars are. And that's what's happening. So to his point, don't buy this dip is what he's saying. These are my thoughts on what he's talking about. I don't think he's being completely forthright with us. I think he thinks Bitcoin is actually quite sexy and he just can't admit his new love yet. Give him a little time. I think he'll come around though. And the next thing you know, he won't be going on about gold, silver, and oil all the time. He'll be talking about how great Bitcoin is.